Left to its own devices, the human mind tends to lock itself into rigid, repetitive patterns. In psychology, these are often called images, misconceptions, and broad generalizations that form closed systems. They limit our perception of what is possible, creating an inflexible internal environment that often leads to deep emotional loneliness. Our usual instinct is to fix this by forcing external results, while leaving the internal environment completely unchanged. It is the psychological equivalent of taping painted flowers onto dead dirt and expecting a garden to grow. Prioritizing outer form while ignoring the inner content of your mind inevitably leads to psychological disintegration. The underlying reality remains fractured and completely stagnant. Breaking out of these rigid closed loops requires a specific open system antidote: visualization. Visualization actively plants a conceptual blueprint in the mind. We can think of this as a prototype, a clear mental framework of what a unified, harmonious self actually looks like. This prototype is not a strict template meant for exact, unoriginal mimicry. You aren't trying to copy someone else's life. Instead, the prototype acts as a catalyst. Its purpose is to stir up and awaken the highly unique, dormant traits that already exist within you. Selecting an effective prototype relies entirely on the purity and clarity of your own consciousness. Visualization requires the deliberate psychological installation of the structural blueprint needed to rebuild your reality from the ground up. For that conceptual blueprint to grow, it requires a life-giving force. You must consciously commit to a larger divine will, or universal consciousness. But the moment new growth begins, it strikes jagged rocks. This represents our hidden internal resistance. It is our fear and the ego's prideful, quiet declaration of, "I will not." Spiritual growth cannot bypass this darkness. Recognizing and deliberately exposing this ugly internal resistance is the mandatory first step before any real transformation can take root. Conquering that hidden resistance relies on a continuous psychological mechanism, often referred to as dying many deaths. This involves the painful, necessary act of letting go of the little ego. This little ego is highly restrictive. It is nothing more than a dense collection of defensive opinions and fixed negative reactions. As those defensive pieces fracture and move outward, they seamlessly merge into a much larger, expansive framework, representing the eternal self. This temporary loss of the smaller self allows for a total unification with a much broader, universal consciousness. Mastering this daily psychological surrender provides a first-hand encounter with an eternal consciousness, which gradually removes the fear of physical death. It continuously clears away the internal wreckage of the old limited self to make physical room for new growth. This structural collapse provides the necessary opening to awaken an actual, limitless nature. The core mechanistic truth of this process is that genuine, hard-won inner growth must inevitably flow into visible, outer manifestation. There is a common misconception that only the inner, spiritual life matters. The reality is that inner harmony serves as the direct building block of outer harmony. A fully realized spiritual life actively erases the false boundary we draw between the internal mind and the external physical world. Reaching this unitive state establishes an immense, unshakable security. That security is derived entirely from an internal spiritual reality rather than the fragile pursuit of external validation. This secure foundation results in an intense creativity, rapidly exploding into new ideas, highly developed talents, and an incredibly rich capacity for feeling. A remarkable paradox of true strength emerges here. You gain the absolute freedom to be soft and deeply vulnerable without feeling any false shame. Simultaneously, you gain the balancing freedom to be strong, assertive, and even angry without experiencing false guilt. This state completely eradicates emotional loneliness. In its place is a profound capacity for relational intimacy and deep fusion with others. In this state, abundance manifests as a natural outward reflection of a limitless universal reality. By deliberately destroying our internal resistance and cultivating the blueprint of our highest self, we naturally blossom into a life of authentic connection and profound holistic abundance.